Gormagat, Cahirlock. And Minister, thank you for coming into the House. I feel like we're standing very close, so apologies. I don't mean to crowd you, but this is the allocated seat. There's a real coincidence that it's today that you're coming to the Seanad with this piece of legislation, considering the storm that is attacking our island, and our thoughts are with all of the coastal communities that are being battered by Storm Barra, and thankfully so far we seem to be getting away with it here in Dublin. But also thanks to all of the emergency services who are under your department's command as well, for the work that they're going to do, have done and will do. This piece of legislation, though, is really important. You said it yourself. It's a game-changing piece of legislation in terms of the state's role in not just the protection of our maritime area, but also the planning and development of activities in the maritime area. And considering there hasn't been legislation really since the 1930s to deal with this issue, we won't be too critical of those who have gone before us, but we certainly will adopt a much greater urgency in terms of our business, and we are firmly committed to having this legislation passed before Christmas. It is an imperative that this House and the Dáil pass it, because it is urgently needed. We have huge potential in our maritime area. You said it yourself. What is it? Over 500,000 kilometres, 7 times our land mass. And this bill, more than 250 pages, 9 sections and 190 parts. You know, we spent a lot of time in the Joint Oireachtas Committee scrutinising in pre-legislative scrutiny. We appreciate that the Department and yourself have taken on a number of our recommendations. And I believe that the recommendations that the Joint Oireachtas Committee made strengthen the legislation, and strengthen it in a way that will ensure that our maritime area is not just protected but also developed for its full potential. And Ireland, and I suppose for its full potential, you know, I started by talking about climate change, and we all recognise in this House and an increasing number outside the House that we must achieve, you know, carbon neutrality by 2050. And Ireland already is doing very well in terms of our production of renewable energy from wind sources, albeit all of those wind sources are onshore to date. We've only the one offshore farm off of Wicklow. And in terms of achieving our targets of, the government has committed obviously to net neutrality by 2050, but 80% of our electricity to come from renewables by 2030. Now, when you put that in context of it taking about 10 years to develop offshore wind farms, we really do need to have a sense of urgency to our work. We need to be very critical, I suppose, but constructive in our contributions to you, Minister, so that we can enable you to have this legislation passed sooner rather than later. And in terms of the legislation itself, the new developments that this legislation will deliver in terms of MARA, the establishment of MARA, hugely important. The putting in place the framework for the issuing of the maritime area consents, protecting those consents and enforcement. All of these are planning functions that we take for granted on a land base, but I suppose we're only playing catch up now in terms of our maritime area. And in terms of the potential for offshore, you know, the government obviously sees huge potential, the industry sees huge potential, and it is our job to ensure this legislation is made in a way that maximises all of that potential. And to go along with the legislation, then we obviously need to ensure that the state deals with issues around infrastructure on land, on the quays, so that the energy can be realised onshore as well, and then delivered for use, but also further developed for other green energy sources. And I suppose green hydrogen comes to mind, but who knows what the future will bring. So, Minister, I commend you for bringing this legislation to the House, for the work that you have done, for everybody who has contributed in your department, and all of the stakeholders, I guess, as well, outside of government, who have contributed in the various public consultations. We look forward to the debate, and we look forward to having this legislation passed before Christmas. Gormagat.